Cari fratelli e sorelle, buona Pasqua. Benedicat vos, omnipotens Deus, Pater, et Filius, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Those would be the last public words of Pope Francis. Vatican officials announced that he passed away early this morning. The first Argentine pope had been in ill health over the last several weeks, suffering from pneumonia, and though he made a number of public appearances yesterday for Easter, including meeting with Vice President J.D. Vance, his condition did take a turn for the worse last night. And so today marks the end of what many consider to be one of the most liberal papacies in decades, which of course then raises the question of who will replace Francis. Here's what the College of Cardinals that will be electing the next pope looks like in terms of their ideological leanings. As you can see, the liberal to moderately liberal cardinals are a small minority. The papal conclave appears to be overwhelmingly conservative, even though Francis appointed upwards of 80% of the current cardinals who will be selecting the next pope. Among the names of the top cardinals that could replace Pope Francis are Cardinal Robert Serra of Guinea. He's a staunch conservative who's defended Western civilization against the mass illegal migrant invasion. In fact, in a recent interview, Cardinal Serra expressed grave concern for the future of Europe, particularly in that through globalization, Europe is losing its sense of origins, its roots. And he said a tree without roots dies. It withers away. And of course, there are a number of other viable candidates. Two in particular is the Hungarian conservative Cardinal Peter Erdo and the Italian Secretary of State for the Vatican, Pietro Parolin. Now, our good friend Konstantin van Hofmeister published an excellent piece on his Substack reflecting on the controversial papacy of Francis. It's a piece entitled Pope Francis and the Woke Church of Collapse. And for me, Konstantin, who's writing as a Catholic, for me, he gave really the best summary and insight on how Pope Francis really did, in the end, unfortunately, embody the decaying, the disillusion of liberal globalism and its demise. And I think Konstantin did a very good job in capturing the essence of Francis' papacy and how it evidenced not just liberalism, but really more the dying, decaying nature of the liberal era and its inevitable demise. It all seemed to start back in 2013 with Francis' rather astonishing response to a question from a reporter on the church's stance on LGBT issues when he said, "Who am I to judge?" Who am I to judge? And of course, that response was hailed by the liberal media as exemplifying, finally, a spirit of humility and inclusiveness on the issue of sexual orientation when it came to the Vatican. Now, unfortunately, very few commentators recognized the performative contradiction entailed in that statement. Who am I to judge turns out to be a judgment. Who am I to judge is, in fact, a judgment. Francis made a judgment there. He made a judgment to side with inclusivity in the very act of denying any judgment. So I knew years back from the get-go that this guy was clearly a proponent of Latin American liberation theology, which is cultural Marxist, and he was inhaling very deeply the postmodern vibes that were popular back in 2013, and it just really went downhill from there. He ended up becoming one of the biggest advocates for globalist open border policies in the world, and the irony, again, the contradictory irony that he never quite saw was how such advocacies clashed with his anti-capitalist sentiments. He vociferously denounced the world capitalist order, as he called it, and the unfettered pursuit of money as the, quote, dung of the devil. But that is precisely what is driving open border policies. That's what open border policies are all about, importing cheap labor so as to maximize corporate profits. Similarly, he claimed to stand up for the people, right, for those most adversely affected by these corporatist policies. And yet, at the very same time, he consistently denounced the populist movements that have been rising throughout the United States, Latin America, and Europe. I mean, that's actually why Argentina's President Javier Milei once called Francis, his fellow Argentine, a filthy leftist in his characteristically colorful way. The Brazilian philosopher Olavo de Carvalho actually accused Francis of being a full-blown communist. And indeed, Francis was an avid defender of liberal globalism and the cultural Marxist takeover of our public institutions. He was certainly no friend to the MAGA movement here in the Americas. I'm including Latin American populism in that. That's sweeping South America, or the mega movements, the Making Europe Great Again movements throughout the continent. And he was a vocal critic of President Trump. And he actually went so far as to equate Trump's anti-illegal migrant policies with Kamala Harris's radical pro-abortion platform, and he called on Catholics to vote in 2024 to vote for what they considered to be the lesser of two evils. I kid you not. Now, thank heavens, quite literally, that American voters did not listen to Francis, because we got precisely this.
We will stand bravely, dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way, because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun.
As we speak, America is regaining its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, and prosperous nation on earth. We have so much to celebrate already. Safer borders, the dismantling of DEI, permission to drill, baby, drill, and $1 trillion in new investments released into the economy. We stand on the precipice of what would be known as the most prosperous time in American history. The only question now is, will you be an active participant in the golden age, or will you sit passively on the sidelines watching everyone else build wealth? Well, if you want to be part of the former, then I urge you to join me and my good friend Mark Wilburn at the Golden Age Summit on Thursday, April 24th at 4 p.m. Eastern. Mark is a stock market expert whose recent recommendations have led to returns of over 200%. He's an amazing teacher, and he's got a knack for demystifying the market so everyday Americans can participate in this golden age we're now in. But don't wait. Seating registration is limited, so click on that link below right now and register for this wonderful online free training today, and I'll see you for an event that promises to be a real life changer. As Konstantin von Hofmeister wrote about, Pope Francis's liberal globalism basically dissected the worldwide body of Christ into Soros-riddled NGOs and migrant quotas. In Francis's view of the world, we were no longer nations, sovereign nations. We were now all just neighbors. And in typical multicultural fashion, cultural identity was denounced whenever it involved Western culture, but it was celebrated and revered if it involved non-Western culture. Here's how Constantine put it, quote, "He washed the feet of migrants, yet never of the forgotten faithful. His chastisements fell on Western nations, those who built the cathedrals he inherited. He aligned with the forces unraveling Europe. Where others saw invasion, he imagined pilgrimage. Where others warned of lawlessness, he praised yearning. This was the creed of universalism, stripped of judgment, discernment abandoned, chaos embraced." Beautifully written. Now, that said, Francis did come through with the recently released doctrinal document regarding the Vatican's position on gender theory, transgender surgery, and surrogacy. Now, given Pope Francis's propensity towards far more liberal sentiments than his predecessors, leftists were actually rather stunned to find a doctrinal statement that could have just as easily come from either Pope Benedict or Pope John Paul II. The document, entitled Dignitas Infinita, or Infinite Dignity, absolutely condemned gender theory and transgender sex change, as well as surrogacy, as an affront to human dignity. Now, while the Church reaffirms that every single person, regardless of sexual orientation, is of infinite dignity and worth and should be respected in accordance with that infinite dignity and worth, nevertheless, gender theory is, according to this document, a, quote, inadmissible ideology, asserting that any and all attempts to alter an individual's immutable gender are ultimately misguided attempts at playing God. So the document went on to reaffirm the Church's teachings on abortion and surrogate pregnancies, which the Catholic Church considers contrary to the pro-life position, given its connection with IVF, in vitro fertilization, which the Church sees as destructive of human dignity at the moment of conception. So, for right or for wrong, the key here is that even with the single most liberal pope in decades, the Church nevertheless affirmed traditional Vatican teaching and tenets on sexual morality. And so, what that appears to mean is that the next pope will continue to be in line with that traditionalism, even if he were to continue with France's rather liberal globalist sentiments and statements. So obviously, we will see that the Roman Catholic Church is ready to rise to the occasion and throw off the absurdities of a dying liberal globalism and instead, once again, take its place as the bulwark, the defender of Christian civilization in a rising civilizationalist world.